Okay, welcome to module 4, and what we'll be doing is as you can see, we're on the website, course website. We'll go into module 4 and we'll be doing the workshop material in a recorded fashion. So here we go, module 4, we're in the workshop material here. So let's just set up first, and what I'm doing here is the Excel portion of the module. So I'm going to download all the files, and you guys can do this as well. I'll just download here so you see what I'm doing, but you can pause the video afterwards and get yourself ready. Put all the files into a particular folder ready to do the workshop. So don't forget, you can pause the video anytime and then follow what I'm doing here. So I'm downloading all the files that are needed for the workshop, one at a time. There we go. Alright. You skip forward also, obviously, on the video, but yeah, I'm just going to go to the folder where everything's been downloaded, and I'm going to transfer all these files into a folder that I can use for the rest of the workshop in a minute. So you can pause and then get yourself ready, open the PDF and open the first Excel file ready to do the workshop. See you guys in a minute. So here I am with the instruction, the PDF file open. This actually lists all the exercises regarding the whole workshop. The first portion here, what we're going to do, I'm not going to read all the stuff for you because you can do it in your own time, but the first file to be open will be this Marita Loan Part 3 number 1, which is the first Excel file which you should have open already. What we're going to do is follow the exercise to actually calculate the staff bonus. Now, in short, so we don't have to read the whole lot, what we want to do is we want to check all the staff using an if function for Excel, all the staff which have basically sold loans worth of $1 million or above, and we want to pay them an extra bonus of $150 for each of the loans, which means if you remember the spreadsheet, which we'll show you in a second, each row in the spreadsheet is a loan that has been sold or, or that we have to test, and each row will imply that we do a test for a loan amount more than $1 million above, and if it is, then we pay the staff member a bonus of $150 bonus on that row, right? So if it matches the criteria. So I'll switch over to the Excel spreadsheet so that we can get this set up, right? Okay. So I've opened the spreadsheet, which we're going to use for the staff bonus calculations. And if you can see here, it's the Marita Loan Part 3 number 1 file. And as I've opened it, you can see if I scroll up and down, the data moves, and we've got a reference sheet and so forth, which we can use as additional information. But before we begin, let's do a little bit of cleanup so it's a bit more professional in function and look, so it makes it easier for us to look at the contents of the spreadsheet. Because if you see here, if I scroll up, everything disappears at the top. So let's just do the first thing is click here in A2, and A2, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually freeze this, so use a function called freeze pane. So view freeze panes, I'll freeze from A2. So from A2 downwards, this will be able to move, but anything above A2, in other words, this row, will remain static now. So if I just click in my data, I'll actually see that I'll always have the context for the data basically frozen, right? So invisible. Now, the problem that we were supposed to address is how do we calculate the staff bonuses, right? So the bonus was, as we said before, was if we have a look over here a little bit further up, we have to fill in this column, right? And the bonus calculation was, if you remember correctly when we looked at the PDF, was we have to test to see if a staff member actually sold or settled the amount of the loan for $1 million or plus, right? So in here we have to include an if function, if function to check whether this cell on this particular row is equal to or greater than 1 million. If it is, then we give them a bonus of 150. Right? Otherwise, we just give them 0. Right? So, how do we do that? In the instructions, this is where I'll do it a little bit differently. Is within Excel, what we try to do is stick to not hard coding or typing values in. What we like to do is reference a cell somewhere, which is called dynamic linking. So reference the cell to whatever the value in that cell is for use in our calculation. So what I'm going to do is just clean it up a little bit, and I'll go to reference. And if we have a look across the side here, you notice we've got large scale threshold. This is the value that we'll be testing, 1 million, right? So in our calculations, we won't be typing 1 million into the calculation, say, oh, is that value, or that cell greater than 1 million by typing a million. We'll actually say, is it greater than reference sheet Q2 in this cell? So to be consistent, we should do the same thing for bonuses as well. So what I'll do is I'll click here to tab to get across. I'm going to actually create our own reference for the bonus value. So instead of typing 150, we'll use the cell S2 value. Right? So staff bonus, and I know that staff bonus will be 150. So I'll put 150. And from week 2, you should know already, I'm going to highlight this formatting. I want to copy the formatting onto our new value. So I've got home, use the paintbrush for copying the format, and I'm going to highlight those two. And now we're a bit more consistent, more professional looking as well, right? So now I can perform an if or test and say if the value of the loan is greater than or equal to this value, Q2, then we pay this, the staff member a bonus of S2, this value. Right? So, which means that if I use an if, and if I've got 100,000 rows, on the 100,000 rows, I don't have to, if you change our mind tomorrow to say, oh, let's pay the staff members $165, all we have to do is change this one cell, and all of our calculations in the corresponding column here will update automatically, rather than us having to go manually change the 150 to 165 in all of these formulas, right? So just remember that dynamic linking to a cell is much better, much more professional and preferred in industry than typing in values. Okay, so let's do the if. Okay, I'm going to go to insert function, and I'll type if, because I'm looking for an if. Go. There's my if. Now with the if, I can either double click here or say okay. I'll just do the double clicky thing. Alright, now here is my test. So what are we actually testing? Well, what we're going to be testing is some value across on this row, which happens to be M2. So I'm going to click on M2, and I'm testing, this is the logical test, I'm testing M2, the value in M2, to be greater than or equal to, and instead of typing in here 1 million, so we don't do this, that's very poor Excel skill. We reference to the cell which has the value that we want to test. So I would go to reference, and I would pick Q2 and click here. Now, now that's in that row. We will be testing the value to this value, and it'll come up and actually give us a true or a false, right? Now, one additional thing which you should have picked up in the previous parts of the workshop is this is actually a relative reference. So if I go back to my other sheet, if I complete this formula and I fill the formula down the column, this value will increment, it'll change, it's relative to wherever the formula is within the spreadsheet. So it would change to Q3, Q4, Q5, etc., which we don't want to do. What we want to do is actually lock it on this cell so that every row will be tested to this cell. So to lock it, we need to use the absolute referencing. So on a Windows machine, operating system, we would just type F4 here, $Q$2. On the Mac machines, I'm not 100% sure, but what the keystrokes are, but you would have to add the $Q$2, which means when you do a fill, Excel interprets the dollar as don't move, so it says don't move Q, don't move 2, right? Okay, so that's done now. So because we want to know what is the, if this is true, if the sales guy in M2 value is more than 1,000,000 or equal to 1,000,000, what happens for true? So true here in the instructions, it tells you to do this, but that's very poor Excel skills. Remember, that's hard-coded values, not liked in industry. We want to link to the cell that has the value. So now I'm going to go to reference, and click on the cell value here, the cell S2, right? And you can see here as well, it says it's a relative address. We don't want this to start incrementing down to S3, S4, S4 if we do the fill. So here we do an F4 again to lock it on this particular cell, which is 150. And obviously if it's false, we don't want to give anything, we just want to give 0, right? So there is the completed Excel or the if function. Now the test here, 700, yes, it's under 1,000,000, so we have to supply $0. So now what I'm going to do is just fill, double click, and you notice all my values have correspondingly been tested. So this is over 1,000,000, yes, he's been paid. Over 1,000,000, yes, he's been paid. Now, one last thing, we want to change this column here to not just give us digits, but we want to get accounting, right? So it looks a bit more presentable, and we can see that now we're ready to calculate the next column to actually get the total bonus. So one more thing, let's have a look at the if. I'll click on there and I'll look at the function. The function, you notice there's another test here, so you can see while you're building the function that you're actually doing it correctly. Otherwise here you'll have errors like NAs and so forth, right? So go ahead, have a look, fill in that column, and we'll try the next section in a second. Okay, let's have a look at VLOOKUP before we go even further in the workshop. VLOOKUP is probably the most important function that you'll use within this course. It's extremely important to know how to use when you go out in industry to work on spreadsheets. Let's have a look, and I'll try to explain it to you without a spreadsheet. Just imagine that we've actually got data in front of us like this, and all it is a sheet of paper in front of you, and the data shows you stock IDs of a particular car type, which is the make, Holden, Ford, so forth. We've got miles per gallon. We've got rating, which people have actually come back and said, oh, we really like this car and so forth, so we keep a rating measure. And obviously the price of the car. So let's just have a look how you would use this list if this was on a piece of paper in front of you before we go into a spreadsheet. So let's say the question by a customer is, what is the price of a Toyota? So the Toyota would be listed under the make area of this sheet of data, and we would actually look at trying to find Toyota and then go across to get the price of the unit, right? And Excel, the VLOOKUP, functions roughly the same way. So we know that in this area here, this is our table of data that we would be looking for. And notice I'm not looking in the stock items column because they mentioned Toyota, so it would be irrelevant to actually look down here because I wouldn't know which ID is corresponding to Toyota. So my starting point would be in the make column, right? And the VLOOKUP does the same thing. When we give it a parameter to look up, such as Toyota, we would see, oh, okay, the very first column is our lookup value, right? So the very first column of our data area has to match our lookup area. So this would be our area, and now have a look at the table. It has 1, 2, 3, 4 columns, right? So 4 columns in here. So when I told you before, when we're looking for Toyota on this sheet, so you physically would look for Toyota, you would look across and go, oh, 38. But in a computer program's sense, we have to tell the program saying which column are we actually expecting to look into to get the value back, right? So we would have to tell Excel, if you find Toyota, what we're looking for in the first column, right? In the first column, I want column 4 back, which would be this value here, 38,000, right? So let's have a look at the parameters for VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP contains 4 parameters. There's a lookup value, there's the table array, which happens to be this area that we've highlighted, and a column number, and the column number is what we want back. So in this case, it'll be 4. And range lookup, I'll explain in a few seconds. So look, what is the lookup value? Lookup value would be Toyota. What is the table array? And we would have to highlight, so actually go to our spreadsheet and click and drag this area. So if this was in C2, we would go C2 to whatever it was, A, B, C, D, E, F. So it would be C2 to F something or other, highlighted in our array. Right? And because we're using VLOOKUP, we want to lock this area, so we're continually searching the same area, so we would have to make this array that we've highlighted absolute, which means $, $, $, right? Now, the third parameter says column number, so it says what column number do you want back, which is listed in this array. So in ours, we noticed that we had 4 columns, so we would say we want column 4 back when you match in column 1. Right? So this would be returning 38,000. Now the last parameter, as I mentioned before, was, well, actually I haven't, sorry, but the last parameter can either be a true or a false. In this case, I'm going to set it to a false. Reason being is false implies that we have to have an exact match to our lookup value. So whatever we were looking for must exactly match this parameter, so Toyota, right? So with a false parameter, it would look through this list and it would only match Toyota, not toy or toy or something or other. So we have to have false as an exact match. So if we run the VLOOKUP, the VLOOKUP would work this way. It would go, where is Toyota? It would find it, and then it would go across 4 columns to return the value that we're looking for. So this would be the return value for a VLOOKUP looking for Toyota. Okay. All right, let's just repeat that one more time so you get it, and then you can understand what we're doing. So I have my data again, and this time we'll change the question. We'll say, what make of car is stock ID H679? Right? So if you had this on a piece of paper in front of you, you would immediately start looking for, oh, okay, so it's a stock ID, and I would look in this column here, and I'd say, oh, where is it? Oh, there it is. Right? There's the stock ID, and what is the make? So I would actually go to the second column. Okay, so that's what you would do physically, right? So how does the Excel VLOOKUP look at it? We have to know what are we looking for in where, in what table area are we going to be looking for it? How many columns in the area, which is 1, 2. So we know that we're going to be looking in the first column, looking for that particular ID, and in the second column is the answer, the return value that we want. Right? So let's have a look at the parameters for VLOOKUP. Lookup value would be the ID, so H6789. The table array would be highlighting the data underneath these headings, so never use the headings and the data, so we would only highlight from the cell that contained F1234 down to Suzuki in this case. So you would click and drag and we would get a reference, a relative reference, and obviously we would have to make that an absolute, which means we add the dollar signs. In Windows machines, remember it's clicking the F4 key. On the Apples, I'm not sure, but you probably have to add the dollars probably manually. So, and the third parameter now, just to continue, is column 2 in our array is what we want back as a result. So column 2 in this array. And the last parameter, remember, a helpful hint is if this lookup value has a letter in it, some kind of alphanumeric, which means an H in this case, we immediately just, it's like a blind rule to say we make it false. So we want exact match for this lookup value. So whenever this lookup value has some kind of letter in it, like a Ford, Holden, that's letters, so immediately we would put in false. Here we've got all the stock IDs start with a letter, so they would immediately be false because we want to match exactly what we're looking for. Right? So let's run the VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP would do this. It would grab the VLOOKUP or the lookup value, and it'll find it in the list. And then because we've said return column 2, it would return Hyundai as a value return for the VLOOKUP. Right? We'll do these in Excel in a second, but I just want to show you one more thing, and it pertains to the lookup range as a true. So let's change to a different set of data. Now the data in this case, what I'm doing is I'm looking at the tax thresholds for income in Australia. And at the moment, you can see here that in the first column of my data, I don't list $1, 1 cent, 2 cents, 3 cents, 4 cents, and so forth, right up to $18,000. But we have thresholds, so it jumps from 0 to 18,201. And then there's 18 to 37,001. Now, we could actually fall in between these if we ask the question, find the tax rate for income of $45,523. And you can see that $45,523 is not listed here. So we cannot use a range lookup of false. Reason is the false would look for exactly this number, which means this table would have to be extremely large to capture all the cents and dollars in between all these reference thresholds. So we can use the parameter true to actually range between these thresholds. Okay, so let's have a look. We're looking for the income tax rate, so we'll be looking for this column here as a return value. So let's have a look. Where is our table? And in this case, I'm not using just column 1 and 2. I'm trying to explain to you here that you can have a table range which exceeds way past what we're actually looking for, just for flexibility, because in the future we might change this question to find lump sums. so we don't have to modify our table array. But in this case, how many columns in this array? There's 1, 2, 3. In this case, we're only looking for the tax rate, which means column 2 will be our return value, and column 1 is always the search value for our lookup value. So let's have a look. What are the parameters for VLOOKUP? VLOOKUP value, in this case, we're looking for 45,523, and 45,523 will be searched in the first column of our table array. In this case would be from this $0. We would highlight from there and drag all the way down to the last value of 54,097, and we would get a range to actually highlight the data. Now the range, remember again, we would have to do the F4, make it absolute, so it's $, or all that rubbish. Now for income, remember we said we want column 2 back, because when we find the income tax threshold, we want to get column 2 back as a result. So the column number will be 2, which would be entered into VLOOKUP. And in this case, like I said before, we're not looking for an exact match. We're looking for numbers between all these. They might happen to fall on these numbers, but we're looking for ranges between. So we'll set true for the lookup range, the range lookup. Now, what happens with Excel when we say true, right? And Excel will take the lookup value and it'll go up the list. It'll go 45,500. No, this is much larger. 45,500. No, much larger. Oh, this value here, 37 something, right? 37,000 is less than my lookup value, so it must be what I'm looking for. Right? This value will be matched with using a true, and because we said column 2, it will return back to 33%. Now the interesting thing here, point of interest here, is that because we're using a true, these numbers of lookup must be in ascending order, so 0 and so forth. It would not work if I flipped this over the other way and I had 180,000, 90,000, 37,000, 18,000, 0. It would not work. So in this, when you're doing a true, you have to have reverse lookup. So even here, this would be ideal to use as a lookup for a true range lookup. So once again, lookup value, it comes up the list and it says, okay, 45,000 is still too, this is much bigger than mine. This is much bigger than 45,000. Oh, 37,000 is less than my lookup value, so it gives a match. And then the match column 2, which is 33% for income of 45,523. I hope that helped. Now remember, we'll do the Excel in a second in the spreadsheet, right? Which you should now know the logic behind the function. Okay, catch you then. So let's continue here. I've just explained just the basic concept of how people look up values, right? We used a web page as an example. Now, in this case, what we're going to do in the second part of the tutorial is we're going to be using a VLOOKUP to find the bonus rate that we actually pay consultants as staff for the types of loans that they've sold, right? So what we're going to do is, instead of like on the website we were looking at Toyota Corolla, this time we're actually going to, or the type of car, we're going to look at the loan type, and from the loan type we should be able to find out what is the bonus that we give the sales staff for the particular loan that they've sold. Right? In the Toyota Corolla, or the lookup, we said, oh, the lookup was a Toyota Corolla, and then we said how much did it actually cost, or what was the rating, and so forth. But in this case, we're going to look up the type, and then from the type we will get the bonus associated with that type. Alright, so let's do that. Okay, so I'm back in the spreadsheet again. So after now explaining what VLOOKUP actually will be doing within the spreadsheet, using the web page, we have to know what we're looking for, we have to know what table of data we have, and then we have to know what column we want to return back for the VLOOKUP. So in our case, what we'll be doing is looking for the loan type. So come over here, let's move this across a little bit. So we'll be looking at loan type. It still hasn't gone across. Okay, there we go. Loan type. So loan type will have to match a particular value within a table, and then what we want back is the commission rate that is applicable for that particular loan type to be paid for this to the staff member, and that has to be in the reference sheet, right? So let's have a look in the reference sheet. If I go across, you notice here loan type, right? So here is my table. So effectively my web page, right? And I know from this table that it's got two columns. You've got column 1, column 2. This table could actually go right across to like 50 columns, so it could be a huge table, and you could say, if you found a certain type of loan type, give me column 20 back. Column 20 might have some kind of GST value or something corresponding to it, right? But in this case, we're only working with two columns, so we'll be looking for a loan type, and then we'll be returning the value in column 2 to get the commission, which is payable to the commission rate payable to the salesperson, right? So this is our table. This is our lookup value, our table, which we'll have to highlight, and then the column number which we want to return, right? So let's try it. Here we go. VLOOKUP. So it's a standard bonus here, and we'll go insert, and I'll type VLOOKUP to look for it, double click to get it in. Okay, and here are the parameters which we just discussed, right? The last parameter, lookup range, I'll explain briefly, but you'll have to experiment with that later on in the tute. But in this case, so lookup value, the lookup value must be on the same row as the function, right? So there's our function. So on this row, the lookup value will be one of these items, right? So we know it's the home loan type. So I'm going to go over here, and it's the loan type. Still hasn't come across. There it is, right? So I know I'm working on the first row, so I'm looking for this value. So click. You notice it says value, so it's not doing ranges, it's a single click, okay? And in this case, we want it to be dynamic. We do not want to lock this, because when we do the fill, we want to actually do the next calculation, next calculation, next calculation. So it'll increment to C3, C4, and so forth as we do the fill on the calculation side, right? So we're looking for whatever's in C2. Now we have to say, where is our table of data? So we go back to the reference, and we highlight the table. You notice I'm highlighting the table without the heading. It's only the data, right? So only the data. And in this case, you should already know we're not looking for this table region to actually move down, so increment. So we want to lock it in place, which means an Control F4. Right? There it goes, so Command F4 or whatever, probably on Apples, but it's the F4 key, or yeah, click on F4 on the top. Now I've got it locked in that area, and you can see it's actually worked. It's got commercial 0.4, home loan, and it just keeps going. So it's commercial 0.4. So I know it's actually working for me. If this value is found, which is home loan, so look for it here. What column index number do we want back, right? So in this case, it's column 2, right? Not column 2. So if I click in here, I go 2, right? And the last parameter is either a true or a false, right? So for what we want, because we want to actually match or say, is that value in the first column the same as this value, which is home loan? So we don't want to match on home loans or some other like car type or something like that. We want home loan to be matched. It has to be an exact match. And the rule of thumb is whatever your lookup value is in here, if it's got text in it, so it has like HOM123, you know, tech, like code, like BB347 or something rather. As soon as it has text in it, this guy here is automatically false. Right? Extremely rare to be true. Right? Now, true is used for things like if we're looking for like a decimal number. So if I had in here, the lookup value could be anything like 0.1, 0.111, 0.5, 0.2, which is like an infinite range. We want to have a varying lookup region, which we would put in here true, right? So if I was looking up for decimal numbers, it's immediately true here. Otherwise, our table would have to be infinitely large, right, to cover all the different options for the numbers. But in this case, it's got text, so we do false, and you notice the secondary test, it's already found a value. It's actually worked for me, so there are no errors in here, no NAs and so forth. So I accept that. And here now, you notice we've actually calculated the commission rate, or commission rate, which is applicable for the first guy. So let's do the double click of the fill. So I'm just going to double click here. Okay. And it's actually found the commission rate payable to all of the staff here. Okay. But what we want to do is we want to, as per the instructions, we want to actually multiply this by whatever the sales revenue is. Right? So they actually get a commission of the sales revenue. Right? So this formula here is not actually complete because we've only got the commission. We want to see how many dollars they've actually earned. So I'm going to complete the formula by adding to it and saying multiplied by the sales value. And once again, we don't want this locked, or we don't want this absolute, because we want it to increment down the rows as we go with all the corresponding functions. Right? So we leave that as it is with that multiply. And there it is. There's the commission, the standard bonus that's actually going to be paid for that particular loan type to the staff member. So we can just fill that, double click. And here we go. We've got all the bonuses for all the staff. Calculated using a VLOOKUP and multiplying the sales revenue to get the actual effective dollar value. Right. All right. Now we're ready to actually find what is the total bonus. And the total bonus will be the very last part. Is just a basic formula. All we have to do is add the two together. Right. Okay. So what I'm going to do is in here say equals. And you notice I'm not typing, you know, T2 plus, Excel's about clicking cells, right? So minimize your typing. So I want to add that plus that, enter. And once again, we want these guys to be relative, right? Not locked, absolute. So we just double click here. Now I have the total bonus payable to all staff. So some of these guys, because they've gone over $1 million paid, they get the extra bonuses. Right? All right. I hope that helped. Catch you in the next one. So before we start with the Excel spreadsheet, doing summations for agents or staff quarterly performance, we have to understand what does the sum if function actually do? How does it function? Right? So I'm going to do a little presentation so you get an understanding or a feeling of the functionality before we go to the spreadsheet. So here we go. We're going to go sum if as a list of people for this example, and what I want to do is use this list to find the corresponding people and their corresponding dollar values. So what what we want to do is we want to summarize. If you can see the list here, you can see that Fred is repetitive through the list, and Mary as well, but the other guy's on the singular. But Fred will have a corresponding value of, let's say in this case he earned $1,000 in some event, right? And then later on we'll see that Fred once again did something in an event where he got $1,200 in an event, and so forth, right? So what we want to do, we want to use the sum if to summarize or or look for certain entity within the list and add the appropriate values together and return a single value for that person. SUMIF uses three particular parameters. The first one is the range, and the range means it's really like a lookup range. So this range would be an area within the spreadsheet, most likely a column, and the column would have reference. So the range would have a reference, like maybe from C3 to C20 or something rather, with people names, and that range is where we would use a criteria to look for within that range. And whenever it actually finds that particular entity, it would use the sum range, which has to be the same dimensions as the lookup range. So this guy here, this range may be in another column like D, so it would be D3 to D20, and it would look for the particular criteria, match that entity, and then add the appropriate dollar values as it goes along, and return one single value, which is the total of what it's matched through the criteria. Now the important thing here is, if you remember previously in the other examples, the criteria can be typed in like this as a criteria, say Fred with double quotes, so it searches for that particular string. But it's not a professional way of using Excel spreadsheets. We want to use this reference somewhere within the spreadsheet, which means we would type this value into a cell and we would replace this text with the cell reference. So in our case, this might actually be in the reference sheet somewhere, let's say Q12 or something or other. So we would actually click on Q12 in the reference sheet to change this, rather than a string. It'd be more flexible to actually have a reference, right? So what happens within the SUMIF? It will use, when the Excel spreadsheet executes the SUMIF, it will use this criteria to search through the range, or the search range. When it finds it, it would add the appropriate value. So this is what would happen. So let's have a look at example. So when it runs, it executes, it would say, oh, Fred, it actually made a match, and the match would then go to the corresponding sum range and add this value as it goes. So the next find would find the next value of Fred, and it would add to the 1,000. So our running total, if you stop the execution of SUMIF, the running total would be 2,200. And obviously the SUMIF will go right through the whole range to find all of the matching entities. So it will find the last one, and it will add this to the running total. So the function at the end would return back $2,450 as a running total, right? So let's stop here and let's try it on the in the spreadsheet. Now that I've explained what the Excel SUMIF function actually does, let's have a look at the question. What we're up to in the exercise is to use the SUMIF to add the quarterly bonuses for all the sales consultants. So what we're really looking for is, and by the way, I'm not using the second file. It's up to you. You can, if you wish. It's a running spreadsheet, but I'm using the existing one, which we just used the very first version. I'll just continue right through the exercises with that one. But what we want to do is use the SUMIF to run run a total of how much total bonus did each one of the sales consultants achieve. Right? So let's do it in the spreadsheet. I'll switch over to the spreadsheet now. So here we are in the spreadsheet, back in the spreadsheet again. So this is where I left off before. You can see here in column B that we've got the sales staff, or the consultants, and each one of these consultants has a corresponding, if I go across, total bonus which we calculated previously. So what we want to do now is basically use a sum if to go along and see each one of these sales staff and add their appropriate total sales to give us a total for each one of these sales guys, right? So here we go. Now remember, sum if uses three parameters. So we'll go back to the dashboard here, and here we have our consultants listed. So we want to do a running total for everything that Kit has achieved, Jessica, and so forth, corresponding in here as a total bonus payment for this staff, right? So let's put the sum if in. I'll go insert function, and I'll go sum if, go, and I'll double click the sum if, right? So now what I'm actually doing, what I will be doing, is I will use the three parameters as we explained just a minute ago. So the range here means where am I going to look for Kit in a list, right? So I have to highlight the list that I'll be using. So it was back in quarter 2, and I know the list of agents was from B2, and I can go down here to B33, and notice I've highlighted as a relative reference. Now we don't want to keep it as a relative reference here. We want to, remember, lock this region so that if we do any kind of fills, it won't move from this area, right? So this column has to be locked as an absolute. So I'm going to click function 4 key. Okay, and I know that I have a sum range which has to be identical in dimension, but I have to highlight where is the area that I want to add if I find Kit or Jessica. So I'll click into this area, into the sum range, and I'll go back to my sheet, and I know that my sum range was the total bonus area, right? So I can go over to total bonus, and I'll highlight, let's go back to the top, highlight there and go all the way down to 33. You notice now I've got all the bonus areas highlighted, and the same happens here. We have to make it absolute, so I'll go click F4. On the Mac, obviously, you might have to type in the $V, $2s, and so forth. Now, the function hasn't finished there. Remember, the important parameter is to pick what are we looking for, right? So I want the criteria to be one of these agents' names. Don't type it in, because remember, that's not the professional way. What we want to do is actually click on a cell to use a reference for that agent, right? So I won't type Kit or Jessica here. I will actually go and click on the appropriate cell. So I'll click in criteria, and I know I'm looking for Kit. If I want Kit, I would have to click on D15 here. So click D15. Now you notice this one's still relative. We don't want to lock this either, because when we do the fill, we want it to actually, we want the function to actually be pointing to the relative cell as we go along, right? So the criteria should not be locked. Okay, maybe in some special events, maybe you do, but in this particular case, we want to do a fill, so we leave it as relative and not absolute. Secondly, you can see that the function's actually worked, right? So it's actually found the total for Kit already for us. So we're fairly confident it's already working. Let's try and see. Go OK. there's the total for kit that the sum if is actually already calculated. Now we can just fill across, and we can see here, if I double click on this guy, we know that the sum the criteria here, D15, is actually going to point to kit. So the range here, which is locked, the search range and the sum range, will use kit D15 as the parameter to look for, right? Let's try the corresponding here. Yes, and we can see that it's working correctly because the range is still the same, but the criteria where it's looking for is actually looking for Jessica now, right? And let's just do one more, and there we go, and we can see that the functionality is exactly the way we want it, right? So now we can see that the bonuses for each particular staff has been calculated for us using the sum if. Now, just to add one more thing is it's much nicer or cleaner if I go here to the sum if, rather than using these dollar and all that column stuff. You should be familiar with already now, is rather than putting these coordinates in that kind of fashion, it's much easier and much better for us if we actually use a thing called, and it's called range names, right? So effectively we can replace this whole string with a label, right? Which is called a range name in Excel. So if I go back here, I can actually go back to my data, and I can look at my consultants here, the list, and I can highlight the list, and here I can actually use the name box to apply a range name, which is effectively a label, to that whole area, right? So I can click in here and I can actually call it consultant and list, right? You notice the range name, I do not use spaces. You don't use spaces, and what I've tried to do is just use capital letters to highlight the next word within the label, right? So I've called it consultant list. Remember here, don't click away. You have to click, or have to type enter so that Excel remembers that label. So enter, right? Now if I click away somewhere, I can actually go to my name box and I can see, there's my new label. If I click on the label, it will highlight where that area or region is assigned to. So I've said consultant list, and I can do the corresponding part here and say highlight my total bonuses, and also give this a label which we can later use in the formulas. So I can say consultant bonus, right? And don't forget, have to hit enter so it remembers it, and no spaces in the label name, right? So enter, it's consultant bonus. Now just to test it, I've got consultant bonus, consultant list. I can go to the bonus, there we go. It highlights the region for me, so I can now effectively use these labels within my formula. So if I go back to my dashboard, I can now go to my sum if. I'll go back into sum if, and I can replace these ranges with the labels or the range names that I use. Consultant list, and I can replace this guy with consultant bonus. And you notice it's actually already picked the areas, and the beauty of it is I don't have to remember all the dollar rubbish or the dollars as well. So say OK, and you notice it's still worked out the values correctly. And have a look at the function up here. No more silly dollars and all that sort of stuff to try and lock things, and I can even fill right across, and you'll see the function now is using up here, the function up here is using the labels or the range names rather than the dollar stuff, which makes your life much easier later on in when you get more proficient with Excel. Questionnaire is, how do I manipulate or change these labels? Well, you can go to formulas and formula name manager, right, here, and you can see I've got lists of the labels which are available within this spreadsheet to use in formulas. So I can go into the list and I can modify the the referencing here if I wish in the name manager. Okay. I'm fairly certain in on the Macs it's under I think it's data defined names. It's you'd be looking for this particular guy here in on the Macs rather than name manager. So it's defined name. Okay, right. Close here. All right. That's the bit for sum if. The next part of the session now is to attempt some really advanced features within Excel, and this is where we're really trying to get to is pivot tables, and using pivot tables to examine data in a very quick and easy fashion. But it's so complex as the functionality behind it is. It has so much power that we can literally look into a table of data and actually look into multi-dimensional, flicking the axes within a chart to see different aspects of the data very quickly by just picking and choosing from the column headers or the parameters that we actually want to evaluate. Extremely powerful, and you'll see how useful it is, especially for your business report, to examine anomalies and so forth within data very quickly and visualizing them by adding a chart. So let's do that right now. So here we are back in the spreadsheet, and you notice I haven't opened third spreadsheet provided to you. I'm still running with the very first version and building as we go along. Your option is that you can open up individually as you go along, because if you reason it's given to you is if you have made a mistake or so forth, you have a working version to actually start working from the next point, right? But if you're like me, you just continue on with the first version. So pivot tables. If you can see here, we've got an extremely large amount of data for us to examine for this business, right? So each one of these columns is basically an item of interest that we can do analysis on. Now, to analyze this data traditionally, we would plot charts and so forth by highlighting individual data and say, oh, clients against bonuses, or say we would pick individual data to map in another worksheet to manipulate that data. But we can actually use what's called pivot tables to look at the entire data within the pivot table and then pick individual areas to compare and so forth as we go along. Now, let's just go ahead and create a pivot table that we can manipulate the data for this session. Right? So first off, what we need to do is actually highlight all the data. Now, for some reason, this spreadsheet, I can't use the very easy method of choosing all data, which is clicking the very top left item here, would say give me all the data, but we notice here that's actually including the blank columns. So rather than doing that and trying to delete and clear data within this spreadsheet, what we'll do is we'll highlight it manually. So from A1, I'll click and drag right down to the end of my data here. So it's ignoring all the blank columns and rows which have been inserted in this spreadsheet. So I've highlighted all my data, and now I would say insert, pivot table, and pivot table will give me option of selecting a new sheet. I can put my table data within an existing, but in this case we just want to use this highlighted data in a new sheet, so I'll say OK. And here we go. Excel has created a new sheet down here. We can rename it afterwards, the pivot table or whatever we really need to. You can do that afterwards. I'll do it now. Double click and I'll say pivot table. All right, enter. Oh, sorry. Pivot table. And now this item here is where my data will, or my corresponding information will be listed as a summary within. This is the actual table. But I have to pick these parameters, which were the headers or the headings within all the column of the data. So I can pick these bits of data and they'll appear within my table. So Excel will extract all the data depending on which items I actually pick to examine. So let's try with the consultant. So I'll click on consultant, and you notice Excel has taken the consultant data and included it within my rows options here. Right? So I've picked all my consultants, and I can literally, you can click and drag these items on and off, or pick this guy and plunk him into the rows option, and then I can quickly say, okay, what about bonuses for these guys? So if I see total bonuses, I can click here and it will appear on my values side of the options here. You notice here also it says sum of, so we'll attempt to have a look at it in a second, but this is just to show you the example. I can click that and drag it off, but the example for the session is to pick consultants and loan types, right? So what I would like is to see more detail within the row information here. 2 levels is probably as far as you go. If you go further, like adding in regions and so forth, starts getting a bit messy. So try to minimize the amount of data you actually look at in rows, in the rows area. Now obviously this is useless information. I need to have some kind of dollar figure to actually look for, and in the exercise we look at sales revenue. So I'll click on sales revenue. I've got it here. Now the spreadsheet's extracted all that data immediately for me. I don't have to create new sheets for every time I want to look into the data in a different manner. So now what you see is that it's actually extracted all the data and summed the revenues for me. So basically effectively done or executed sum ifs and so forth automatically for me. Now on the Mac machines, you might actually find sometimes this will come up as a count rather than a sum, so be very careful of what you see in here. Let's have a look. I'll just will show you how to manipulate this this parameter in the values, and it's called it's actually called value. It's a pity it's going off the screen here, but if you get the drop down list box, click on the item which says value field settings, which should pop this sort of dialog for you. Right. And you notice sometimes on the Mac you'll actually have a count instead of sum. If we have a look here, if I do sum, I can also do other options. I can also execute other options, show in different terms like percentages of totals and so forth, which we'll do in a second. Right? So just make sure that you're on sum. But what we want to do is we want to change this number field to actually show the correct format. So we'll change the number field to show counting, and I want 0 decimals. So if I go OK, all my number fields are now in new format. The next thing that we want to do is I'll quickly just add in a chart because it's a lot easier to look at visualizing data through charts than seeing all this jarbled info on the side here. So the quickest, easiest way is just to click in the column in the white part, not on the blue, on the white part anywhere within this region to create a chart. And we say insert chart, and I'm just going to put a column chart in. There we go. So I've created, very quickly, I've created a chart which represents my data here. So it's a bit easier to see the data within a chart than on this column here. You notice also too, it's all jarbled all over the place, so it's a good idea to sort this from in a fashion where it's largest to smallest, so it's very quick to see, visualize what is our best and what is our worst. So the quickest way to do that is you can do data sort, say largest to smallest, and now what it's done is actually it combined and it says, okay, what we've done is we've gone to see what is the largest to smallest within each one of these categories, right? So I can even do a right click sort largest to smallest. I can see top level that Kit was our best performer right down to Pedro, right? So what I've done is I've actually sorted the top level, which is the bold areas, and I've sorted the inner parts as well quickly by just using a data sort or a right click sort. Right. Hope that helps. Now that is the total revenue, but what about counting the amount of loans that each one of our sales representatives has sold? So we can do a count here to see how many loans were actually completed by each one of the people. And you notice here immediately the chart is updated as well to represent the count. Obviously they're not dollars, so here we would have to change the format again. Right? And you can do it through the field settings in the number formatting. So we can say general. Okay. Or you can alternatively, you can also highlight the data. You can just do this sort of thing and say home and change the formatting appropriately there as well. I'm going to leave it as general. So it corresponds to your chart. Right? The other point being is that you can also use this value field setting. It's unfortunate it's going off the screen here, but when I go to value field settings, you can also show these guys as the percentage of grand total. So what I'll do is I'll do sum, so the total revenue, and then show it as percentages rather than actual dollar figure. So I can actually see how much Kit is actually done, or created about 39% of the sales. Right? So you see the power of the pivot table. You'll have to experiment a little bit more on what you want to look for here. Maybe even change parameters. Like if I can do total revenue, and I'll just say from agencies, and we can actually see agency, or let's say from regions. If I said, oh, which region was the best performer here, let me change that back to revenue. Change field settings, and I'm going to show this as just normal no calculations. So I want my total revenues, and obviously here again, even in your business reports, don't hand in data like this. We want to see the largest to smallest. Most is much more useful for us. So I can actually see that Western was not the best performer, Outer Eastern was very quickly, rather than seeing these numbers all jumbled up. And again, I can just highlight here and just show dollars if I need to, and so forth. Hopefully that helped you with the pivot table. You will need to know how to use the pivot table definitely for your business report, and you'll most likely have many of these charts where you'll have tab after tab with trying to analyse the data for your business report assignment, which will be due later on in the semester. Hopefully that helped. I'll see you guys in a second. In this next portion of the exercise, we'll be looking at creating charts for analysis, and also doing a bit of predictive analytics by using the fill function on the data that's provided. I won't be using the 5th spreadsheet. I'm just going directly to the 6th spreadsheet, because it's kind of wasting my time and your time in a way. So I'll just show you very quickly how to do the exercise for the 5th spreadsheet, and then jump directly down to creating a chart, so we can actually see the data, like visualize the data, rather than just looking at numbers on a table. Let's just jump into the spreadsheet, and I'll explain further there. Okay, we're back in the spreadsheet again. This time, as you can see here, I've actually opened up the Marita Loan spreadsheet number 6. I've bypassed number 5 because I really didn't want to waste your time. It's exercise 5 to show you the power of Excel to actually do some quick forecasting or trends that you can run on a series of data. And you can see here that we've got a series of data which we've collected from April to September, but what we want to do is we want to actually forecast or predict for the next 3 months what we expect this series to do in the next 3 months, basically, right? So let's just do it very quickly so I don't have to open the previous spreadsheet. I'll just highlight a sequence, and I'll use the power of fill to complete the sequence for me. So there's October, November, December. And what I can do is, let's just quickly instead of spreading these guys out to unknown dimensions, let's just copy the width of this guy. It's about, let's say, about 12, right? So I can highlight these guys and do column width, just to make it look more like the rest of the sheet. And I'll just quickly put in a colour. There we go. And now, so what I can do is I can highlight my sequence and use the power of the iteration engine within Excel by using the fill to actually predict what I expect for the next 3 months. So there it is. Right? That was the exercise using spreadsheet number 5. Now I could plot that in a chart, and see what we're expected to see in the next 3 months of our business activity, right? So let's continue with the activity for creating a chart. And what I'll do is I'll create a combo chart, which means that it'll contain both of these series of data. So both of these bits of data will be plotted on the same chart, right? So highlight from A2 to G4 and do insert, and I'm going to do a combo chart rather than just a column chart. So combo chart, and I'm going to pick a dual axis type secondary axis chart. There we go. That's just a quick visualization of this data, right? So I have in the orange line is the number of loans, which is the secondary axis, so the number of loans, and the total revenue from those loans is in the blue bars, right? Later on in the series, you can use the functionalities of how to change the chart type and all these items within the chart. But it's a good idea to click on the chart to get into the chart design menu. And in the chart design menu now, I can actually simulate these guys, or the data which we did we actually executed the fill for forecasting by putting in trend lines on here. So I can quickly do that. You can even do that by adding trend line. So you click a series, so click the blue bars and do right click to add a trend line, or the line itself, the orange line. If I click on this, I can add a trend line. But what we'll do is I'll click the chart and add elements. And you notice here you can add a hell of a lot of stuff to the chart to make it more presentable, and to transmit a little bit more info for us. But what we'll do is we'll just add trend line as a linear progression, and we'll pick the blue bars, the sales guys in the first instance. And what you'll see is if I do a right click and format trend line, I get the options here what I can do with that trend line, like all the different parameters available to me. But what I want to do is I want to forecast for 3 periods in the future, right? So if I do that, you can actually see there that the trend line now is going to be plotting what I see for the next 3 periods. So the next 3 periods would obviously be October, November, December. So you can see here that revenue expected in December would be about 140,000. Right? Let's have a look at our trend over there from the fill, and you can see here it's matching because it's using basically the same kind of formula. Now if I just quickly, because I didn't do a trend line before, we can do add parts, right? Trend line, and do add lines for the loan type, which is quick way. I'll undo that, Control Z, and I'll just do a right click, add trend line. Right? And with the trend line now for the loan types, I can also add in 3 periods, right? If I click away, and you can see that trend lines basically match. So I would expect about 32 loans total sold in December, right? Okay, all right. That's a very quick exercise on how to do chart, or how to plot charts and so forth. But what I'd like to do very quickly is, what you might find is, because the trend lines, when you add trend lines, it's very difficult to add the October, November, December and so forth, and to see the amounts. So if I just delete this chart, I can do the same thing as I did before. I can use the fill function here to do predictions, forecasting, and I can do the same thing as I did before, highlight all my data here and do insert combo with the secondary access, and you see I get a nice, this is much more presentable, especially for your business report, to see what are we expecting in the next 3. You might even want to change the color of these 3 bars and so forth, just to highlight that they are added in as a forecast or a trend. Right? All right. So for the last part of this session that I'll be covering on the videos, I'll be going through these questions here in a rough way, because they seem to sort of repeat, but you'll get the idea of the most common functionality that you need, or the functionality you'll need to understand for your business report. Further on the conclusion, past the conclusion, there are advanced techniques and formulas, but it's basically a revision activity. So it's up to you to continue on. I'm not going to do videos for this section further on. You should be able to tackle that on your own. If you do get into difficulty, don't forget you can always email your tutor or myself, willing to answer all questions. So let's have a go at some of these questions here, which is like who's made the greatest number of referrals, right down to how many loans have been referred by ABC Real Estate, right down to the total revenue by some lender here for the most popular home loans. So we'll rush through these. It won't be exactly one after the other, but I'll cover the functionality that you have to understand in using pivot tables. It's extremely important for you to understand that for your business report. Okay. Alright, here we are with the spreadsheet for the last part of the exercise, and I won't be doing the following, the advanced features and the revision section. So this is just to run you through how to use the pivot table to answer specific questions, right? Now, I know that we'll be using the quarterly data here in this data sheet, and I know that we'll be using this referred by data within our pivot table. Now, because there is a problem with the spreadsheet, if I double click in here, you'll actually see that there is a space in some of these cells, right? So we really need to clean it up before we can start doing any analytics. So what I'll do is I'll quickly just highlight the blank areas, and the way I'm doing this is I'm holding the control key down and highlighting, right? Control key, highlight. Control key, highlight, control key, highlight, control key, highlight. And now what I'm going to do is right click and clear contents. So all of my blank cells should be containing nothing, no spaces and so forth, which can really play havoc with the pivot table. So clear contents, and I will save my spreadsheet. Now, because we need this data in this sheet for the pivot table, I will highlight A1 all the way down to the end of my data. Okay, there. Try not to add in any blank columns or rows, and I'll do insert table. Check that the region is fine. Yes, it's a new sheet. Good. So we're ready to go. I'll just rename this sheet pivot. Oh, I did it again. Pivot table. Okay, now here is my pivot table. This will be showing my selections from the fields that I can use within that data set, right? So the first question says, who made the greatest number of referrals? So if we look at referred by, I can go down to sales revenue. So my referred by is in my rows data, and my sales revenue is in the values. The guys on the Mac, make sure that this is showing sum rather than count. Actually, in this first point, we will need count. So here are our referrers, and that's the sales revenue that they've given us. So in other words, who made the most amount? In other words, the count of. I will go click on this guy, and because it's off screen, you click the value field setting option on the drop down. There's my value field setting, and I'll go count, right? And just for business sake, click in this white area, right click, sort largest to smallest, right? So I can see who has made the most amount of referrals, and it's basically the walk-ins, right? Walk-ins, but referral wise means that ABC Real Estate has made 5 referrals. So they are our our people that have referred the most, right? Okay, how much did these guys contribute through the referrals? So that's the count. So what we want is the sum, right? Sum of total revenue. So we can go over here and go value, do sum. So how much did they actually contribute? If I highlight this column and actually just do dollars, and click on the dollars, I can see that ABC Real Estate gave us 16,389.23 cents. Yep. So that answers one of actually several of those questions. Now, next question. Which region had the lowest amount of sales revenue? So region. So now we leave revenue in the values, but we want to replace the referred by region. So I can put region in here. And I'll sort this again, largest to smallest, and I can see that Western was the lowest sale, the Western region was the lowest sales revenue. Okay. Now here is the tricky bit. What we need to do is, because the next question actually says, in the northern region, what was the total sales revenue for July? Okay? For July, which means we have to include dates within our table, pivot table here. And what I'll do is I'll use the settlement date, which means that it'll only use the dates of loans which actually have been settled, because I don't want to take a chance and say, oh, approval was never passed. So here I can actually do something very tricky. This is an advanced feature which you should use in your business report. Is I can do a right click. So I have to click on the date field. I can right click here and do grouping. Right? And you notice the grouping allows to give me grouping on days and months, right? Okay. So let's say I just do grouping on months, and I want to cover the full of July, 31st of July to the end of July, so 1st to the 31st, and I do OK. I'll actually get the total for the month of July. Okay. So if I wanted the region, what was it? The northern region. What did the northern region? The northern region in July had $18,038. $38. So the important thing to take away from here is that you can do groupings. Right? You can even do quarterly groupings. Right? So I can see quarter 3 and so forth. But remember, this is that this grouping only happens on the date field. So if I click on the main like the regions themselves, and I do a grouping, I will not get any date options, right? So you have to click in the date area for the grouping, or ungroup altogether, right? Okay. All right, now I'm not interested in settlement dates anymore, so I'll remove that. And the next question is, what is the most popular loan type? So in other words, popular means the count. So we can get rid of region, and we can put in loan type. But loan type, we would want to count the loan type. So count the loan type. And I'll go in here and I'll sort again, largest to smallest, and the most popular is home loan, right? Okay, that's another question you answered for. Now the next one says, how many first home buyers received a home loan, right? First home buyers, which means that we have to look at client type. So if I get rid of here, I'll go client type. So I've included client type. And I will just sort this just so it makes it a bit easier to see. And first home buyers, we can see the answer to the question is 8, right? So 8. Which lender is most popular for home loans, right? Home loans. So which lender is most popular for home loans? So in other words, we have to say what is the loan type, right? Oh, sorry, lender. We're interested in lender. And here is a bit tricky, because if we say loan type, it's a bit hard to understand what is happening here, right? So what we really need to do is filter on the loan type. And now with a filter enabled, I can actually pick home loan. And now for home loan, I can sort this, and I can see which lender is the best for us for home loan type, and it's IG Direct with six home loans into us. Now the last question says, for those 6 home loans, how much did they actually make? So we can just change the count value field settings, back to a sum, and just to make it a bit more readable, so ING Direct was 31,543 and 2 cents. Right. Okay. All right. Hopefully that helped you. And the power of pivot tables, the manipulation of it is just incredible. So last thing is for your reports, we're not interested in seeing this sort of stuff in the report. You click on the white region, insert, create a chart. There we go, and that's what we're after, right? We're after charts which have meaning for larger, more sort of gradients and so forth, right? Okay. Hope that helped, and if you have any problems with the additional parts of the advanced revision for the rest of the tutorial, just email and we'll get back to you, right? All the best. Bye.